Justin, welcome to the Erasing Shame podcast.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
So, I've heard of a cold open on SNL, and you just mentioned to me that other people do it too.
At least I know that other sitcoms have, and some of the funniest ones I've found were on The Office. I won't go too deep into that, but oh gosh, I wish I could remember the name of it. But there was a fire drill that they had to do, and that sitcom that TV show, and it was a lot of people would agree with me that it's probably one of the best cold opens in television history.
Wow.
Yeah.
I gotta look that one up. So what is a cold open? I mean, do we just start the show without a intro, without the bumpers?
I guess that's what it is. I can't give you an actual definition of it.
Okay.
But I do think that might be it. I don't
Yeah.
think we're too off base by saying like, yeah,
Yeah.
we're just going.
Okay. Well, I was very inspired by SNL and a popular podcaster named Joe Rogan.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And he just gets into the conversation and there's no intro. You don't know who the guest is. Sometimes you do. You have to look at the your podcast app or something,
Right.
and you just hear voices talking.
Here we are.
Yeah, so here we are. Erasing Shame podcast, Justin
Come on.
Kiley, and I was introduced to you over email by season 5 co-host Hannah Lee Sandoval, and you were in a plane together.
Yes, we were. Oh, and it's KEE-lay, by the way, as far as like.
KEE-lay.
Yep.
Oh, that's quite a flair.
Yeah.
Even though it's spelled Kiley.
Right. And
So what does that mean?
So it's a Filipino last name. It's a very tribal last name, specifically for the Igorot people over at the Philippines. That's my tribe.
Yeah.
And we're mountain people, and we're hunters, and it means. I mean, there's a lot of backstory here in history, but it means this guy limps. Is what that last name means. And it just so happened that it shares the same spelling as a very Western name.
Well, good to know. Thank you for the correction.
Yeah, of course.
You're the first KEE-lay I've run into.
Nice. There's not a whole lot of us, I don't think.
So it's a small tribe.
Well, the Igorot tribe is like pretty dang huge over at the Philippines, but at least for my family with our last name, I want to say that like we're 50 strong, maybe even more. No, way more. I hadn't even considered
50
my
what?
family. 50 individuals here in the
Okay.
United States, at least. Far more in the Philippines from what I can remember, but we're sizable.
All right. Good. I mean, tribes can be big or small, but when they're big, they become clans and cities and dynasties.
Right. Not so much as those latter two. We're pretty humble.
Yeah. Well, I'm Chinese American.
Nice.
And I have some distant wealthy relatives in Macau and Singapore. And they did a research on our family tree. And they traced back our Chuangs 21 generations to this village in Fujian province. And they wrote out the whole family tree, and my name's even in there. So
wow,
quite thorough.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah, but I've never met any of them outside of my immediate family.
That's usually how it goes, I feel.
But when my dad passed away, I posted my dad's obituary online, and one of my distant cousins found it and contacted me, and we've been having a few conversations over Google Translate. So that was pretty wild.
That sounds like a lot of fun, actually. Yeah.
And then he shared a photo, and I was like, "Oh, we have the same eyebrows."
Oh no. Key family features, yeah.
Yes, the strong family eyebrows. Yeah. So the first question that starts many of our conversations here on Erasing Shame. What comes to mind when you hear the word shame?
Oh gosh.
And And then we talk for half an hour or an hour.
Sure. When I hear shame, gosh, I probably messed up somewhere.
Mm.
Uh, I think that's like if I can keep it short as far as like a definition goes, like
But wouldn't
uh,
that be guilt?
I guess so.
Then what's the difference?
For me, I don't know. Like personally, I know that like some of my unhealthy motivations in the past have been don't embarrass yourself
Mhm.
and don't bother anybody.
Mm. Mhm.
So in my head when I hear shame, part of that comes in with like, well, I messed up and so now someone else has to pick up the slack for me
Mhm.
kind of deal. Shame for me, I don't know. Man, it's harder to define in words but more easily like defined in experiences and feelings, I guess.
Yeah.
Um
Mhm.
I hope that answers your question there. But
No,
giving you a
it's
follow-up
very much
question. Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, it's very much a open conversation
Mhm,
because many of us for generations have never talked about shame.
mhm,
So it's really hard to put words to it, but we know what it feels like.
mhm,
We know when we experience it. Even the KEE-lay tribes,
mhm.
yeah, in the Philippines.
I mean, gosh, in even in Filipino culture, like loosely translated, like a phrase that is always said, "Have you no shame? Aren't you
Mm,
embarrassed by this?" Like, you like how bold of you to do something like that to bring like to embarrass yourself like this. Like, have you no decorum? Kind of
uh-huh.
kind of connotation there.
Yes.
Um, so it's very much so like at least I can speak for my own experiences and for what I've experienced within my culture, where it's like you got to be prim and proper, and um, don't you dare move out of line.
Mm,
And there was always that like that I never I never questioned it. Like, yeah, sure, the question would be posed, have you no shame? Of course, I
mhm,
avoided hearing that directed to me
mhm.
at all costs.
Yeah.
But there was never any like, okay, so what? What happens if I bring shame to myself or to the rest of the family? Like, what's happening here? And like there was very little like steps forward. Like, so we're not gonna like so this is why we're not doing this. And these are proper steps so that we can't do that ever again. It was just no, don't do that.
Mm,
Stop that. That's not okay.
yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, I can relate. The term we use in Chinese is, don't make us lose face, or
Mm.
that was such a losing face thing to do,
Mhm.
or don't bring shame to the family name.
Mhm.
And then when the parents say that, we don't really understand why,
Mhm.
and we just begin to develop this habit of being risk averse and
Mhm.
not trying any new things because we might step on the tripwire and cause shame. That's how it relates to me as I hear what you say.
It's funny that you would even mention that because yeah, like even taking a look at my own life and my own personal history, um, I never actually decided to try anything for myself, and I've usually waited for someone else to
Mm,
me in,
mhm,
like, take me with them, like, "Hey, let's do this together."
mhm,
And I'm over here freaking out, like, "Well, what about this? What about this? What about this?" Like, I mean, it doesn't necessarily have to uh, like be a fearful thing about like, well, what if I get embarrassed, yada yada. But like that's still that unhealthy motivating like part of yourself. Um about like what if something bad happens and I
Yeah.
have no control over what ends up happening and then I mess up somehow. All these like what ifs and like am I going to do something wrong? I just
Yeah.
don't want to be wrong, you know?
So understand
Mhm,
as a fellow Asian person.
mhm.
Yeah. Now, why do you think Hannah wanted us to talk?
Great question. Oh gosh, I
Now, I don't want you rehashing what you and her talked about,
sure,
although
sure,
we
sure, sure.
although we could go there. But
That's
I want our listeners and viewers to get to know you too.
sounds good. Yeah, I'm one of my
That's why I want you
superpowers is
here.
being vulnerable. I appreciate that so much. Um, for context a little bit, um, it's so hard for me to even like pinpoint what my strengths are and what's so interesting about me. I can
Hmm.
tell you all of my weaknesses, all of my flaws, that my self-perceived weaknesses and flaws and everything. But to tell you like, oh, this is why Hannah wanted me on this podcast, I'll be like, you'd have to ask her because um,
Okay, that'll be part two.
probably. But I will say that, like, at the very least, I do believe that like she found my story interesting enough, and even like parts of it where it's like navigating, navigating difficulties within ministry and
Mm,
working at a church, and even navigating what it's like to be a person of color within a predominantly white community.
yeah.
Like for context, even more, I grew up in Southern California.
Okay. That's where I
Um,
live now.
it's a
I'm in
great place, and
Orange
I miss it
County.
so much. My friends and my family live there. Shout out Palmdale, California. Um, but like you get so used to just how multicultural the environments are, even the more quote unquote white dominated populations in cities and towns and counties and everything. There's a like there's still a good amount of like people of color in those spaces to where it's like you just can't help but pick up a lot of what the rest of the world has to offer in those spaces. Whereas you go to the Pacific Northwest, where I currently live right now,
Mhm.
man, I'm teaching people a whole lot of things and people are asking questions and everything. But there's no one that like, well, I can't say no one, but there are very little amounts of people where I can look at them and have a conversation and like I'm on the same page with them. Um,
Mm.
like I don't know, even talking about burritos is like a can be like a very close knit like bonding kind of conversations with people. Whereas I kind of don't I lack that cultural closeness with a lot of the spaces that I find myself now. Not to say that like I'm not thriving where I'm at currently.
Well, those are big conversations. That could be hours
Oh,
of
absolutely. Yeah.
conversation. But I have yet to find someone who has 3 hours available to do one of those Joe Rogan experiences.
Yeah, understandable.
But maybe one day. We'll
Maybe
see.
one day. I mean, I'm a talker and I mean, I can slot out 5 hours if I wanted to, honestly. Well, just not today, but maybe I'll have to join in again on another episode.
Well, if we get a spike in the traffic, then
For sure.
that's going to be my main key performance indicator that people want to hear more.
Sounds good. Sounds good.
Okay. So our average episode gets about 100,
That's
listens.
still a lot. Like
Oh yeah,
imagine
yeah,
having 100 people gathered to just listen to you. That's crazy.
yeah. Over 50,000 in the past 5 years,
Oh, God bless. Okay.
and we have no budget, no staff. This is a passion project, and I just feel urgency to really erase shame.
Hmm. Come on.
and we do it by having honest, healthy conversations.
Mhm.
Yeah, and so, well, the church world. So I'm a
Mhm.
mental health advocate,
Mhm.
and erasing shame was one of the first things I did towards that.
Mhm.
I've got a ministry thing called Christian Asian Mental Health now, where I
Mhm.
coach and equip churches to develop their mental health ministry,
Mhm.
so people can feel care and supported for. And one of the recurring conversation that's beginning to surface, because there's not a lot of work being done on it, is the topic of church trauma.
Mhm.
Now, I've picked up some signal that you've had some uncomfortable situations working in church
Mhm.
and maybe attending church, but I hope it's not to the degree of trauma, is it?
I wouldn't say so, but
Okay,
I could
shoot.
also be wrong. Um, Definitely, like, moving forward with it and healing from it, of course, and, I mean, I don't want to hang on to this for the rest of my life, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
There's a lot of praying and, like, processing that's involved currently, um, and we're moving towards forgiveness for sure.
Mm.
Mhm.
So maybe trauma is an overstatement for
Maybe,
the
yeah.
church hurts that
Mhm.
we all have experience with.
Mhm.
Church
It's a
hurts,
whole
misunderstandings,
Yes.
scars, painful things,
Oh,
hard
absolutely.
conversations.
I will say this in the fact that, like, it's definitely a whole different ballgame, I wanna say, like, getting hurt on staff
Mm. Oh my.
versus, like, getting hurt just by attending. Like, I yeah, those are kind of like apples and oranges, I feel. But at least for my
Well,
sake,
both of those are fruits.
they are fruits. Absolutely, yes, they are. Uh, but definitely, like,
Now, most of our listeners are not church staff people, so
sure.
describe a bit of the difference.
Well, I do think that, like, um, church hurt from, like, a staff standpoint is like, has to deal with a lot of, like, mismanagement,
Mm.
um, and just, like, not meshing well and everything, and, um, either mismanagement or, like, people just don't see eye to eye,
Okay.
and people are unwilling to budge. I mean, truth be told, like, I was unwilling to budge at one point,
Mm.
and I hurt myself by doing that.
Mm.
Whereas, like, it could be a whole different plethora of things when you're just like a person attending church, uh, and then you seek out for help, and you were kind of fumbled, so to speak, about that, or um, someone, and I use the phrase that I'm about to use here in quotations, in the name of Jesus, give you advice or tell you things that are incredibly hurtful and damaging. Uh, I like those are ways that, like, I feel people who are attending church can, like, receive church hurt in that sense. Um, yeah, or just like people on staff, people who are ministry leaders, just like um, I don't know, maybe some miscommunications. Again, there's like a whole bunch of different things here. I haven't done a whole lot of research into that myself. Um, but I mean, I'm wary about using the word abuse here
Mm.
because I mean, at the worst, it is that. But I don't think that, like, it's always coming from abuse where people do get hurt. Sometimes it really is just like people don't see eye to eye, or something has been miscommunicated, stuff like that. I hope that answers your question.
Well, then there's definitely different degrees of church hurts,
Mhm.
and there's some people that are just oversensitive. So let's acknowledge that part
Yeah,
of it too.
there's that too. Yes.
Yeah. So we have people. So we have the whole spectrum. Okay, people are oversensitive. You run across differences that
Mhm.
may become disagreements, and then some
Mhm.
people are mean about those disagreements, and some people wield their power in an abusive way.
Mhm.
And then there's malicious
Mhm.
abuse, and then there's violation, and then there's trauma. Okay,
Mhm.
so I think I've just hit some of the points along
Right.
that spectrum just to spell it out so we can get a handle around all this, because in some circles, like on social media, the
Mm.
word abuse and trauma gets thrown around way too loosely, and
Yep.
it's not quantified, and it's not uh, nailed down. It's just kind of confusing. And then you add another layer to that with deconstruction and people really wrestling with the meaning of their faith.
Mhm.
So uh, it's messy.
Yeah, oh yeah,
But
absolutely.
because it's messy, for me, I think it's all the more reason we have to get engaged in that conversation to get to make order out of the chaos.
Mm.
But the
Mhm.
tendency with some people in the church and Christian world is to avoid those conversations,
Mhm.
which doesn't help.
Yeah, and in fact, I mean, speaking about shame here, a whole lot of, like, church hurt, I feel like, comes from that too. Like, just being unwilling to address the guilt and the shame and, like, being so averse to it and running away instead of, like, pressing in and, like, "Okay, what's happening here?" And, like, "Let's investigate a little bit more."
Hmm.
Um, and even more so, it's not talked about be like, because it is shame. It people do feel shame about it.
Yeah.
Like, we don't address the church hurt because, like, nobody's talking about it. Nobody's saying, like, speaking up for anything, and it's kinda just like, is our church community that unsafe then
Hmm.
to where, like, we're so blinded to what's happening under our noses?
Hmm.
I'd hate to be part of a community like that. I mean,
Hmm.
I won't say names or anything like that, but I mean, I was in the throes of it, and it was incredibly heartbreaking.
Oh.
Yeah,
Mm. Now, eh, okay, so let's wind the clock back a little bit.
a little bit.
So,
Yep.
like in movies, they do the
Mhm.
what do they call that? Flashback,
A flashback. Yeah.
right? And then you flash forward. So, flashback. What prompted you to move from Southern Cal up to the Pacific Northwest? That's a big move.
I hate how simple this is, but like I think there's beauty in it, and that like it really was just God.
Okay.
There were several churches up in Washington um, that I interviewed with somehow, some way. Like it was only Washington that I found churches to interview with within my denomination,
Okay.
um, and one stuck, and only one of them wanted to continue to have conversations with me as I um, move forward with getting licensed as a pastor, yada yada. And um, this is the only church that said, um, "Yeah, we'd like to continue to have to have this conversation and this interview process through COVID back in 2020." Uh,
Oh wow, that's quite a time. Yeah.
but I will say that like it was definitely God's movement that
Okay.
brought me out here.
Yeah.
Um, so
And
yeah,
you're a denomination that really wants to follow the spirit.
yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Does the name Stacy Knapp ring a bell?
Stacy Knapp, you have sent an email. No, like she would. That email is the first time that I've ever heard of her, and it's incredibly fascinating how she's pastoring this community. It's wild that they're international as a church.
Yes,
Kind of wild.
because they're online.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
there's no geographical limit.
Mhm. But there
Eh,
is still this call to community and like
Yes.
gathering together where you're at. And I
Yes.
that's so cool. Instead of just like, hey, stay at your home. It's just you and your dog and join us for church.
Okay. How about Cynthia Ware?
I don't think I've heard of that one.
How about Charles Lee?
Charles Lee. Yes. So
Aha! There we go.
he was, in fact, he was a minister at one of the churches that I used to attend to.
Yeah.
Uh, Wrote a book and everything. I'm like,
Yes.
hold on.
New Hope South Bay.
Yeah. Like, huh? Like kind of a big deal in my denomination, and
Yes.
like it's just super cool. I think, oh gosh, what was the name of the book?
Some
A
like
Good
great
Idea Now
idea.
What?
Now what? Yeah.
That's the one. That is the one. And I still need to pick up that book. I've heard so much about this guy, and I'm like, this is kind of really cool that like this dude is in my denomination. Anyway.
Yes. Yeah. So for those of you who have not figured out what the denomination is, it is Foursquare.
Mhm.
And those are the four people I know in Foursquare. That's my trivia test to see how well you're connected in the Foursquare world. And so you're at a Foursquare now. What do you
Mm.
do at the church up there in Washington?
So I've just actually moved out of that church, and I'm now currently living in one of the suburbs of Portland, Oregon. So I'm moved from being a Washingtonian to being an Oregonian,
Hmm.
and
Portlandia.
oh yeah, I I did live in Portland for a good few months, and then I'm like, no, no, sir, can't do that no more. But to answer your question, I am both the worship pastor at this church and one of the next gen pastors. So working with youth and young adults specifically.
Great.
Hmm.
Very cool.
Hmm. I would think so. It's a lot of work, but it's
Still
like
Foursquare?
still Foursquare. Yeah.
Good. Fascinating denomination. I've enjoyed connecting with them
Hmm.
on dozens of occasions.
Okay.
Yeah. And so what does it mean for you to be Filipino in Portlandia and at a church like that?
I'm asking myself the same question.
Okay.
I really am. But I will say the fact that
What are you free to talk about versus not talk about?
well, I'll say this
Yeah.
right from the get go, and even during the interview process, I felt like home
Mm,
at this church. Incredibly welcoming, incredibly healing. And I've said this to my coworkers in the past, where it's like when you're working as a church staff member, oftentimes you need to outsource a therapist or a counselor outside of your church community for you to find your healing. And by no means am I saying no to that. I have mentors and counselors that I reach out to every now and again. But it's crazy to me that I am currently finding healing within this church staff.
oh, that's
Uh,
so cool.
and it's a beautiful thing, and I love it so much. And there's a whole lot of freedom to just be me. To talk about shame here,
Yeah.
um, and I'm not embarrassed to show them my true self.
Mhm.
To like, I don't hold back as I'm leading worship on stage. I don't hold back as I'm ministering to the youth or anything like that. I don't have to put on like the right personas or the right faces or the right whatever. It's just, oh, I care about you and I love you, and this is how I care and I love for people, and this is how expressive I am, and thank you for allowing me to be wild and expressive and crying every 2 seconds while I'm at church. Like, it's so much fun. And in fact, as far as like the ethnic part of it is, like we have a good amount of Filipinos at that church as well. So it's not like I'm out of touch with that as well. It's kind of just we're living, and like
Yeah.
there's no gigantic push for like well, we got to know Justin. We got to know his culture. We need to make our spaces a lot more friendly towards him. Like y'all are like they're not like that. It's incredibly friendly. I get to like I have the freedom to be me, um,
Hmm.
and and that's what it's like to be Justin in this community.
That's so cool. There's no sounds like there's you don't have to do holding back the tears
Hmm.
to quote a song name.
Hmm.
And Filipinos are known for dancing, so you might be able to do a little jig now and then.
I'm loud too. I'm so,
Well,
and
uh,
they let me be loud.
yeah, that's great. That's, I mean, Foursquare churches definitely give more room for that than some other
Mhm.
churches are more reserved. So
Mhm.
I'm so happy you found a home in Happy Valley. What a
Yes,
cool
sir.
name for where you
Come
live.
on. Yeah.
Yeah. And then what does next gen ministry look like?
Next gen ministry. Man, it really is just like hanging out with a bunch of middle schoolers and high schoolers and talking to them about Jesus and like just letting them out like this is why Jesus is so cool. And this is the reason why we choose like him and his and his ways over um the things that we get fed on TV, social media, like all of those things um to mildly imperfectly quote one of my coworkers, um the way of Jesus and the life that he has laid out for us to live, his teachings, all of that, I find to be like not even just ethically the best way to live, but even the most abundant way
Mm,
to live.
what a great word.
Yeah. And so that's what like next gen
So
ministry looks like for me. It's just like, hey guys, come with me. Like, let me show you like why I'm so jazzed about this, why I
yes,
care about this so much. And
yes.
man, the students that we have are some of the greatest bunch of students because they're so incredibly inquisitive, but a good amount of them too are just unafraid to live so boldly about their faith. And it's encouraging me to like to live the same way. I'm like, guys, I've been doing this for roughly 10 years. You guys have been doing this for 2.
Mm,
I'm encouraged by you.
that's amazing. There's something about Portland that brings out people's faith. I mean,
Mhm,
Bible Projects comes out of there, and
mhm.
some really
Bridgetown
good.
Church, yeah.
Yeah, there's some
Mhm,
really good churches that are well grounded and yet thriving in the midst of um, organic culture. I don't know, but what's a good hangout place out where you are because you're not anywhere near Powell's.
oof. You're right.
There's
You're
lots
right.
of coffee,
Oh man, some of the best coffee. I'm not even kidding. I'm meh on Starbucks now.
of
Um,
course.
not I go to Starbucks if I have nothing else to go to. But there are a bunch of good coffee spots. Honestly, just go on Google or Yelp, and
Hmm.
the ones with 4-star ratings usually are really great. Um, let's
Yeah,
see.
that's how I Yelp.
I would even say that like man, the food truck scene is crazy out here, and so many great fusion foods, so many great food in general too. Like people are incredibly creative with how they're doing food. I'm a foodie myself, and so I do enjoy from time to time perusing like everything that Portland has to offer, even the greater Portland area. Because even at my workplace, there's a food cart or there are food carts a minute drive, and I go there almost every single Sunday with my girlfriend. It's so much fun. Hikes are great out here in Oregon, even near Portland. Um, yeah, like it's amazing. But please be aware that if you are going to decide to live out here, seasonal affective disorder is a very real thing, and I experienced
Mhm.
that very firsthand. So just be aware.
What do you do when the sadness comes every season?
Well, I will say that this past winter
Mhm.
was the first winter where I didn't even experience it. So, like, really
Oh.
praising God because of that. And it's a combination um, of community and rest and being out of a environment that wasn't conducive for thriving.
Mm,
Um, but really, the major thing there to combat the seasonal depression and everything, stay in community.
yeah.
Take care of yourself and stay in community. Those are the 2 things that I would say, would combat it because it's so easy to just neglect your needs. You find
Yes.
yourself just wanting to eat crackers for breakfast, lunch, and dinner,
Mm.
um, with a cup of coffee in the morning.
Well, as
Um,
long as they're Ritz crackers and not saltines.
yeah, yeah. Sure. But quite literally, you're not drinking water, and all you've had are Ritz crackers and a cup of coffee, and you woke up at 10 a.m.
Mm,
Um, like,
okay.
yeah,
Well,
all that.
you hit a key ingredient, and we're gonna close on this point and
Sure.
see if we get a spike in the traffic on this episode. If people want to hear more from Justin, because he
Sure.
has such compelling stories, and he's a great storyteller. Great hang next time in Portland. We'll definitely hang.
Ooh, please hit me up.
So, the Surgeon General of the United States pronounced that America is in a loneliness epidemic. So we we kind of know community is the answer to that,
Mhm.
but why is it so hard to find and get into community for many people?
Man, because well, I would say that firstly, it's just so easy to find your niche in within online communities, I would say. Um, Not to say that, like, those aren't real communities, and forgive me for, like, for saying what I'm about to say because I don't have a lot of research to back this up,
Hey, speak freely. Speak freely.
but I there's something about actually gathering with people, and I do believe in what scripture would say that, like, yeah, God saw Adam and he was alone and he sent all these animals to go be a partner for Adam, like, for help and whatever, for companionship, and none of them were up to snuff. And then God said, well, let's make another human being for Adam to be with. Um, and that goes beyond like spousal stuff and everything. Like, no, like camaraderie and everything with another human being. And in other places saying like, don't neglect to gather together. Like
Mhm.
that's really good for you. Um, but in any case, like it's number one, it's so easy to just like hop on to a Facebook group and like chat it up with faceless names and um well, I guess I can't say faceless because there's pictures there, but even still, like
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you're not having a face-to-face conversation with this person.
Yes.
Um, I feel as though that kind of stuff just removes yourself from this sense of belonging, this sense of togetherness, this sense of like, hey, we're sharing in a common purpose, whether it is to play pickleball together or play chess together or play Dungeons and Dragons together, um, like it's just one of those things where it's kind of just there's it just feels so good to be with other people. But it's both like that's true, but also it's the fact that like no, it's really scary to go see and find other people because what if?
Hmm.
But
And that's the part that really affects the next generation. You just put your finger on it. Is the what if, and it's scary, and there's not as much development of the social skills. because we've been behind the screen so much,
Mhm.
especially the next gen that's grown up in a world that's always had internet. And I'm very pro social media. I'm very pro tech,
Mhm.
but I'm older, and so I'm not tempted and manipulated by the algorithms
Mhm.
the way younger brains that haven't developed are impacted and are influenced.
Mhm.
And so there is data now
Mhm.
in this brand new book that just came out by Jonathan Haidt
Mhm.
called The Anxious Generation.
Mhm.
Tons of data. He's a social psychologist, behavioral psychologist. So
Mhm.
there's a lot of data about how social media has negatively impacted
Yeah.
the next generation. So for you as a next gen pastor, this would be a great resource to pick up along with others that care about the next generation that are
I need to write
listening
that down
to our
actually.
conversation.
Let me see if
Yeah,
I
I'll
can.
send you a link.
Ooh, please and thank you.
Yes, and it'll be in the show notes at
Oh,
erasingshame.com
come
of
on.
this episode for people that are listening. Yeah, I think it's a watershed book to really help us understand the impact of tech because it's so new. Even the laws can't keep up with it, but
Mhm.
it's already affecting so many people during
Mhm.
COVID and after COVID that, well, we're still reeling from the impact. And so thank you for providing places to hang out with people in real time, real space.
Come on. Yeah.
And 2D conversations are good, but 3D is way better.
Oh, absolutely. Amen to that.
Yeah. So I hope to meet you in one person. In per I hope to meet you in person one day, perhaps on a plane, but better in a coffee shop.
Ditto.
Justin, do you put yourself out there anywhere on social media if people want to connect with you?
I may or may not use Instagram. By that I mean I do scroll a lot on Instagram, but I rarely post. But you can follow me at Justin Troy _ on Instagram. That's kind of really the only social media spot
Okay.
that I'm in right now. So
Very good.
yeah, say hi to me. Would love to chat. If I don't message you immediately, it's because I'm juggling way too many things in my life.
Well, treat your girlfriend well and
Will do.
God's blessing on what that may turn into.
Oh, amen. Come on, I
Okay.
received that.
Thank you for watching or listening to this episode of the Erasing Shame podcast. If you like this, please indicate on Spotify, Apple Podcast, spread the word, and we'll bring Justin back if you really love hearing his story. He's got more to tell. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to the Erasing Shame podcast. Get this episode's show notes at our website, erasingshame.com. Subscribe to the Erasing Shame podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or any podcast app. And please add a rating and review so that we can reach more people with our message of hope and healing.